to this special world building stream that I'm doing. This is a promotion for my latest book. Before we get into introducing all the people, I will put the book on the screen. This is the Ultimate RPG Game Master's World Building Guide. We'll talk about that more in a second. First, I want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to meet our guest. And this is Alexandra Rowland. Alexandra, welcome to the One Shot Twitch stream.
Thank you so much, James. It's wonderful to be here.
I am very, very excited to have you here. I'd like to give you the opportunity before we really get rolling on everything to tell everyone who you are and where they can find your work.
So hello, I am Alexandra Rowland. I am a fantasy author. I wrote A Conspiracy of Truths and A Choir of Lies, which are about they actually start, this is sort of like the relevant reason why I'm on this podcast, because both of those started out as world building exercises. I just wanted to do a bunch of world building and I wasn't planning to do anything with it. In fact, I told myself I'm not going to use this for any project. This is just for fun. And somehow I ended up writing 2 books so far in that world, with a third one coming out next year. The forthcoming A Taste of Golden Iron comes out from Tor.com Publishing next year, and that is about a beautiful prince and his stoic, grouchy bodyguard, and they solve some mysteries and they kiss a lot. And I also have a 3-time Hugo-nominated podcast, Be the Serpent, which is about literature and media, and especially the role of fan fiction in the broader literary conversation. So I'm all over the place, and I think I'm not too much on Twitter these days, but I'm _@ Alex Rowland there. And probably the best place to find me is through my email, which is on my website, alexandrarowland.net. That's everything I have for you.
which is a lot. And you know, definitely your world building is absolutely one of the reasons that we invited you on for this. I've read A Conspiracy of Truths, and like I had so much fun with that book.
Thank you.
I can't even remember where I first got recommended it, but I had a lot of fun reading it. And one of the coolest parts about it for me as a reader and somebody who really loves world building is how much small stories were woven into the actual narrative itself. Like it's a book that centered around characters telling stories that were, you know, kind of about the world and kind of about cultures, but it felt very authentic to the story of a storyteller, you know, who is desperately employing their craft to survive. It was a very cool exercise, and I think definitely like makes you an excellent fit to show off kind of how this book works. For those who don't know, my latest book is part of a line of RPG accessory products that I have written. These are for folks who love role-playing games and love aspects of role-playing games that normally happen away from the table. Things like developing characters, things like developing backstory, developing your setting or sessions or what have you for your game. It's usually something that is a lonely activity. And anyone who is super creative and really likes collaborative process knows that it can be a bit challenging to take your creativity to a lonesome place. So my books sort of structure and use game mechanics and provide prompts and whatnot to help make that process for those who love collaboration a little bit easier, a little bit more fun. So I, in the world building guide, broke down some of the most popular RPG genres and created exercises to help make like cornerstone aspects of a setting or world or scenario that would help inspire ideas and lead you down an exciting path for your own creativity. And that's not just relevant to RPGs, that can be relevant to any creative exercise that you're indulging in, which is one of the reasons that I wanted to invite Alex on the show, although Alex is also an RPG fan. I wanted to show off that, like, yeah, you can take somebody who, you know, is a storyteller and a creative and come away with something that is super fun and exciting outside the realm of RPGs.
Yeah.
So we were originally going to do this event as part of like a bookstore, like a bookstore tour, but it was a digital bookstore tour. So that fell through, but I am a big fan of Alex's, and I was super excited to like actually get to do this. So I decided let's do it on our own.
Don't make me sound like the cool person here, James. I'm also a big fan of you.
You're the
It can
guest.
be.
You are the guest.
You're the person with the book, James. I'm just here to make you sound cool.
Well, that is collaboration, isn't it?
We can have a mutual appreciation society here. It's cool, James. It's cool.
I suppose that's true. I suppose that's true. But when we discussed doing this originally, one of the things that we discussed was doing a fantasy setting. That is definitely something that we were both extremely familiar with. I might make out. Oh no, wait! I do have a Scrivener open. Thank goodness. I have been using the Scrivener document instead of the physical book to read for streams, and I was afraid that if I would have to minimize our faces in order to find it, but nope. Okay. I just have to go and open up the
Well, I also have a
Worldbuilding guide.
document open here, so I can take some notes as we go if necessary.
Excellent, excellent. Well, where we were going to start with our world building process is we wanted to do some magic system development. By far the largest and most involved exercise in the whole book is called Making Magic, which sort of breaks down different magic system archetypes and provides like prompts and ways to build out a magic system for whatever setting you're working with. So we are going to first identify what types of magic we would like to include in our new setting that we're going to forge, and we'll develop those, and we'll see how much time we have left from there. But I imagine we'll be able to use those as springboards for future development. Okay, so
Sounds good.
There are 6 paths of magic that I have identified for development. So I'm going to read them off to you, and you can decide which ones you feel like you want to mess with today.
Okay.
The first we have is scientific magic. This is a magic path where results are very repeatable and structured. It's things like alchemy, where you need to use formulas and do calculations to produce magical results, but they are still like, otherwise it would just be science.
So this is like the hard magic system where like you do X thing and Z thing happens.
Oh, this is a fun thing. I am not very deeply embroiled in sci-fi fantasy like culture, so I actually don't know hard magic as a term, and I'm learning something right now. That's cool. Yeah.
So there's hard magic and there's soft magic, and of course like it's a spectrum. And I've heard people call it like night or day magic, or like logical and numinous. Like there's a couple different kind of ends of the spectrum, but basically like hard magic is sort of like in the Mistborn books, for example, where you have the metals, and each metal does a specific thing, and there are set rules that can't be broken, but then that gives you some interesting constraints to play with, because constraints sometimes make you more creative. Because if anything goes, if there are no rules, then you don't have to really think about things, and your first thought can be the thing that you go with. But if there's rules, if there's something that says, oh, well, my first thought, I can't do that because that doesn't fit in with the rules, what's the second thought? What's the third thought?
Right,
and those are often more creative and more interesting than the first one. And then soft magic, on the other hand, is more sort of like artistic and impulsive and impressionistic kind of magic, where like it's just you do the thing. Like Gandalf, for example, is quite soft magic. Yeah.
Well, that
Please
is
continue.
perfect, and I would definitely define like the scientific magic. That is the hardest magic that we got
Yeah.
here. I think something interesting that we will discover as we go on is the ways in which rule systems are being imposed on all of these magics,
Mm.
and how that produces soft magics. But we can talk about that later. The next type is artisan magic. Artisan magic is based on forms of creativity, and that can range from sculpting and painting, weaving and crafting, to music, writing, and even physical performance. But it is like elevating creative endeavors with magical effects.
Okay.
Um,
Where you
the
have to like make a thing in order for that thing to be magical or to like have a magical effect, or it could be either one.
It could be either one. Think of it as like these are creative endeavors that exist under their own merit in our world, but
Right.
in the fantasy world, engaging with them could also produce magical effects in
Another
a way.
effect. Okay.
Sort of how the scientific magic is systems of in mimicking like structures that science provides. Like you
Right.
use that to develop a magical logic.
Okay.
The next is arcane magic. Arcane magic is all about knowledge and secrecy. So
Mm.
it is, when we think of like D&D wizard style magic, the idea that studying in itself is magical and holding secrets is magical, it is sort of has that approach of scientific magic, but it errs more on the numinous side, on the soft side, in that the secret itself is the magic, and that sort of thing. There are a
Okay.
lot of different paths that you can walk down for arcane. Under that, I have like also included like that's where you find a lot of your birthright magic. A lot of magic that is granted by patrons or something like that.
Okay.
The next form of magic is natural magic. Of course, that is based on different elements of nature, whether it's magical animals, magical plants, nature itself as a thing being magical. Also included in that is like elemental magic and spirits. After that, we come to what I eventually called legendary magic.
Mm.
This is kind of like deep world magic. Like if you think of the Chronicles of Narnia, when Aslan talks about like the true deep magic of the land, that's the reason
Yeah.
that he was allowed to come back. That's legendary magic. It's your Deus Ex Machina magic. It's your ineffable magic that just defines the laws of the universe that you really can't manipulate so much, but you can definitely interact with.
Okay.
And then finally, we come to forbidden magic. This is magic that most people would identify as evil magic. I would say it doesn't necessarily have to end up being evil magic, but it is certainly magic that has more severe costs to it, and magic that I think tragedy is interwoven into it in a way. So yeah, those are the types of magic that we have. Of those, what did you like?
Quick question. Quick question. What's the distinction that you're drawing between forbidden magic and arcane magic? Because I see that those could be quite close together.
So the forbidden magic versus arcane magic can have like all magic has costs. All of these magic has a section where we will define the cost to them. But
But forbidden is more about the cost.
exactly, and the
Okay.
cost is
Okay.
is more severe. Like an arcane wizard might be an aloof force who's got all sorts of secrets and whatnot. A wizard who's a master of forbidden magic is like a creep.
Yeah.
Or has paid so dearly for the power that they have.
Yeah. 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 Okay. Okay. Cool. 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 I think well, artisan magic jumped out at me right away because like I've been doing a lot of crafts this week
Oh yeah,
as I
that's
told you
right.
earlier. So like that sounds like fun, and I do a lot of crafts and making things. So that one obviously appeals to me. And then I think legendary magic also appeals to me because I haven't explored that very much in my own work.
Oh,
And so I
cool.
think it would be cool to like sort of stretch my stretch my abilities a little bit and try something that I wouldn't normally, that wouldn't be the first thing that I would usually pick up. So I
That's
think that
rad.
those two would be, yeah. I mean, sure, like teach me about making legendary magic, James. I can do that.
Yeah, I
Like
don't know how
I
fit I am to teach anything. I did
you wrote
just
a whole
need
book about it.
well,
Um,
you did have to explain some basic terms to me at the start of this. So, you know,
terms are made up. Terms are
that's
made up.
hey, I made this book up. It's all made up.
There you go. It's
Great.
all made up.
So for the paths of magic that we're going to develop, we are going to go through the different pillars which within each of those paths. Those are
Okay.
the source, the cost, the potency, commonality and accessibility, and pillars of mastery for that magic.
Mm.
Um, so we are going to go down to artisan magic, and the first things first, we have to determine the source. Now, Alex, I will offer you the opportunity. You can either choose one of the sources, or we can roll for it. It's up to you.
Ooh. Uh, well, tell me what the sources are first, and
Oh
if they
yeah.
all sound amazing, then we can roll. Or if I can't choose, then we'll roll for it. And I have my own dice out here.
Oh, sounds
Um,
perfect.
thank
Um,
God they were within arm's reach. Uh,
yeah, you should always keep some dice within arm's reach.
well, I just cleaned off my desk the other day, and so I wasn't sure if they were.
All right. So the first up is music. That's arts based on rhythm, melody, and sound. Then we have textile. That is weaving, knitting, and knotting, or embroidery. Then we have writing, which I believe is an activity that we are both familiar with. Um, but that can also include symbols to a degree. There is
Okay.
a blurring of the line with arcane in that a little bit. Then we get to sculpting. That is sculpting material like clay, or blowing glass, or carving wood.
Mm.
Shaping metal. Then we have painting, which is using dye, ink, and other visual components. And finally, we have physical based artistic magic, which can be things like dance, gymnastics, or acting.
Those are all quite good.
Yeah, that's the thing about art. It's all of it's
They're
kind of
all quite
good.
good. They're all quite good. Um, I'd say let's roll for it. How many was that? Six?
That's six. That's a
All right.
D6.
See, where's my D6 here? There we go. All right. It was number three.
All right, three. That is writing. All right.
Okay. All right.
So
All
I'll
right.
read the little blurb I put down here for writing. Magic based around the creation and arrangements of words and symbols. This magic can come in the form of artifacts like spells and scrolls, or be channeled into recitation like storytelling and poetry.
Hmm.
So before we get too deep into thinking about what we want this magic to be, we have to choose two costs for practicing it. The potential costs that we could choose from are as follows. There is time. It takes a significant investment of time to practice or work this magic. Very few things can be accomplished quickly. It
Mm.
causes strain. Practitioners need to rest and recover to avoid injury. There's an emotional cost. Artisan magic requires serious emotional investment from the practitioner and often leaves them exhausted and drained. There's intricacy. Using artisan magic might require complex interplay of different forces to work properly. Even for masters, these details are not always aligned. And finally, material. This magic requires expensive tools and materials to work properly.
Okay. I love the one about time. That was kind of like when you were first reading about the writing. I was like, oh, this could be a thing where like it just takes a really really long time to cast a spell. Like you have to sit there and recite like an entire epic poem in order to accomplish this spell. No, maybe not
Ooh.
an entire epic poem, but like a straight hour of recitation or something. Um, what how about you pick the second cost? So like time is my
Okay.
pick. um I think that I was straying a little bit away from materials. I like the idea of like you can do this magic anywhere. You don't need anything except like what comes out of you. Like you
Yeah.
could do it out loud, you could do it by writing it down, but I don't want like materials to be a constraint here.
Okay.
Any of the others though sound good.
I'm gonna put the X card on the table for this and let you know that we can toss this away. But
Okay.
as someone who's currently writing a book, emotional cost is definitely something that I could
It's
find
real.
appealing.
It's
in
real.
This.
Yeah.
I sort of like the idea that like you know, because time is a factor in this.
Yeah.
Like if you are like writing a novel or you know, any novel length work, if that is a magical spell, like the process of that being a very emotionally difficult thing, that like, you know, maybe the months that you need to compose this spell, like you are kind of racked with like the emotions of the spell, and you know, there might even be like a danger of like, are you going to finish it? Because if you are mid spell, like you're going to be swirling with those emotions. Like,
Yeah.
there's
And is it going to do the thing that you intend it to do? Like there's a lot of just not it's not even like a magical cost. It's just like the actual cost of making something is just sometimes like this. So
yeah.
yeah, I love that. I think that totally makes good sense.
All right, time and emotion are our
Yeah.
primary costs, which is very cool for me on this. Which then brings us to defining the next factor, and that is potency. What determines how like what makes this magic potent? What makes a spell in this more powerful or more capable than another spell? Or what makes a practitioner more powerful and more capable than another practitioner? So our choices are practice. Each spell is an expression of time of the time a practitioner has spent honing their craft. They become more powerful as the caster becomes more familiar. Creativity. The power in artisan magic is held in each practitioner's unique creative expression. Even established spells and rituals depend on the caster bringing something personal to the table. Education. There's a specific set of techniques that needs to be mastered in order for someone to have full understanding of this type of artisan magic. Materials. Practitioners are limited by the quality of their tools and materials. Even a novice will find greater power using a higher quality material. And intimacy. The more personally and emotionally significant a spell is, the stronger it will be.
How many of these do I get to pick?
You get two. We get two.
I get two. I get two. Okay. I love the intimacy one.
Okay.
I think that's great. And I think that really fits in with sort of like what we're building so far, especially about it having an emotional cost. And then there was one in the middle.
There's creativity, education, and materials in the middle.
I think it was creativity because we said no on the materials at the last step for cost. So I think creativity, like it's what you are capable of coming up with or thinking of, and as how intricate you are capable of making it. So creativity and intimacy is what I would go for.
Yeah. So the creativity, like one of the hooks of creativity being that the caster really needs to be bringing something to the table or about it, which is, you know, a fascinating thing of, you know, someone's written sentence or expression of an idea, like how individualistic to you are you making it. The closer you get to the center of yourself, the more powerful it can be, is great, especially considering that intimacy is the other half of this.
Yeah, I thought they paired quite well.
Yeah, these are definitely two great tastes that are going to taste great together.
Yep.
So now we come to commonality and accessibility. And Alex, we've got a little quiz that we're going to walk ourselves through.
A quiz. All right.
I am going to, and when I say quiz, this is like a BuzzFeed personality type quiz.
Oh, I see.
But for our magic. Oh,
okay.
I have just been notified that I have been coming through on one audio channel this whole time. So forgive me 1 second while I pause the stream to fix the advanced properties of my microphone. And okay, I should be coming through on both channels now. I apologize to our listeners for that. But thank you so much for notifying me. Okay. Back to what we were doing. We're taking a quiz. What we're trying to do is determine how easy it is for people to use this magic, how common the magic is in the universe, how easy it is to learn and take up. So we're going to answer these questions. The first is, are people aware of this magic? And the potential answers are yes, as a fact, yes, as stories or rumor, yes, but only privileged groups, no, with few exceptions, no, it is lost, or no, it is new.
I think that I like either of the first two, either yes or yes, but only in rumors and stories. Do you have a preference for either one of those?
Yeah, I'm trying to think through. There's something very millennial about the writing magic that we've put together. It's got that taste of desperation to it. Which
the freelancer life.
Yeah, that makes me like it's not even I would say it's before freelancer. It feels like being interested in creative writing in school, like when you're in college or high school, where you feel the pressure and the need to be a certain thing with your creativity, because like you don't have any idea of the larger framework of what will get you opportunities or what will uplift your ideas. So I want it to be yes as fact in that, people in this world, they know about this type of magic. It's a thing that you can pursue. The next question is, how integrated into society is this magic? It's a normal part of everyday life. It's normal for special holidays and ceremonies. It's reserved for certain milestones and special needs. It's normal only for certain people, or it is separated from everyday life.
That's a good question. And I think that this is kind of like my favorite question to ponder when I'm making magic systems, because like I love to build a magic system that doesn't break my economy. And that can be quite easily done. I think that like since we've established that this takes a long time, and that it probably takes a significant amount of training and practice to be able to get to the point, because you have to really like learn about yourself and dig deep into your voice and what's important to you and what matters to you to be able to do this magic. So I don't think that it's going to be a yes in all areas of life situation. I think that it's going to be, and since it does take so long to create something that is magical, I think that it's going to be a little bit more rare and special, and you might be able to only do 1 or 2 spells per year.
I like this a lot. Yeah, I like the idea of it being kind of a mix of milestones and holidays and ceremonies. I'm thinking about not just the people producing this magic, creating these spells, but also the people, I guess, receiving this magic. The idea that it's not just that you write a book and that affects you, you read a book and that affects you.
Oh, I just got chills, James. This is like so important to me, actually. That I have thought about this in my work like so much. Like the relationship between the author and the audience is something that I always keep coming back to. This is great. I love this.
Yeah, like what if just as part of life and whatever culture for this world, like you read a book every year or choose to recite a book, or maybe writing a book also takes up one of those slots or whatever, but it's a way of like understanding your development and your life. Like I think a
Yeah.
lot about how Christopher Lee, you know, gosh, I really hope Christopher Lee is still alive. Reads the Lord of the Rings trilogy every year, like using that as kind of a rhythmic like anchor to his life,
Mm.
and understanding his life through that narrative, like every year of his life. That seems very powerful. But there are also many books that I associate with just a particular time in my life growing up that
Yeah.
defined my outlook for that period. So yeah, I will figure out the specifics later, but I
I think
really,
that's
really
great.
love that. I love it.
Yeah. 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 Is
Um,
there going to be a question about like how many people practice it?
Yes, the next question is
Okay.
literally who can
Great.
use this magic?
Great.
And yeah, the answers are everyone, almost everyone, anyone who chooses, privileged people, but it is a common thing to have that privilege, privileged people, but it's rare to have that privilege, and almost no one.
I think it's going to be an anyone who chooses situation because
Ooh.
like it does limit you, right? Because of the amount of time that it takes to get to a point where you're capable of making something magical, right? Not everyone is going to have the desire to do that, like let alone the privilege. Not everyone wants to do that. Some people have other hobbies, right? Some people are maybe happy like if do it like we mentioned that this might be part of like festivals and holidays, and so there may be like an element of you do a creative thing to mark your passage through life, but not everybody is necessarily going to be making something magical out of that thing. Like maybe
Yeah.
you write a poem to like commemorate the fact that you got married this year, yay.
Hmm.
But it's not like a magic spell. And so it's kind of like there's the cultural part of what goes on around this creativity thing, but then there's also like the magical part, and some select people choose to study it and follow that path and go deeper into it and get to the point where they're capable of doing that.
Yeah, I kind of want to define that as far as like the receiving end, like the reading or recitation end of this magic.
Yeah.
I think it should be common as you're growing up, a part of your education. Like you are required to do a certain amount of this, but as an
Hmm.
adult, you kind of can decide like whether or not you are a practitioner, whether or not you are writing
Yeah.
or whatnot. You are deciding whether you are going to emotionally open yourself up to like
Right.
one of these
Because that's a
spells or words.
choice. Because that's
Yeah.
a choice that not everyone can is in a place that they can do. Yeah. Yeah. That's good. That's really
Yeah.
good.
Um, then the next question is this magic considered acceptable? There is yes, yes in certain contexts, yes in certain places, no with few exceptions, no it must be hidden, and never.
I think yes in certain contexts, because I think that there are also contexts where people are like, no, you shouldn't use magic for this. I think that adds kind of a little bit of a layer of complexity to it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
like for example, you don't want to use magic for a love spell. That's a bad idea. That's not cool to do in any context.
Yeah,
Um,
that was like literally my thought was like magical erotica in this world like must be an extremely taboo thing, like regardless
yeah,
of what effect it would have on the people writing it or reading it. Like
yeah.
I can
It's a whole
very easily
consent situation. Yeah,
yeah, I can see that being a problem. So
yeah,
yeah. So and also like we had described milestones and whatnot, and holidays and whatnot. The idea that it is like there is a time in your life or moments in your
yeah.
life where people expect you to be reading, and then there are times
Mm.
where they kind of expect you not to be. Is good. And that also creates a cool separation between people who just consume these written spells and people who produce them. Because
Yeah.
if you're a writer, you are in it all the time, kind of unavoidably. And if you are a reader, you know, it's not so much, which means that like a mainstream society might look at writers as a little weird, which feels proper and correct to me.
Yeah. And like every time we've mentioned the festivals and holidays, I keep like having this image in my mind of someone like sort of ritually reciting a story or like speaking in front of an audience, and like there's an kind of an element of consent there as well. Like you're choosing to step up on stage and like reveal this part of yourself, like reveal part of your innermost heart. That's part of the intimacy of the magic, and the people in the audience are choosing to be there, receiving it and listening to it, and sort of like opening themselves up to what you're telling them.
Yeah, in this
So and
world, as in our world, it should
Yeah.
literally be illegal to read your poetry on the street corners.
Very good, James. Very good. Yes, I agree. Wonderful. Yes.
Great. So yeah, I like that a lot. The next is this magic respected? The answers are yes, universally, yes, mostly, yes, in certain contexts, yes, in certain places, no, with the exception of a few places, no, with the exception of a few people, and no, universally.
I think that yes, in certain contexts fits with what we have been saying before, because like don't read your poetry on the street. Like that's not an acceptable place. So yeah, it definitely feels like there's a venue, a correct venue for this to be happening.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And I'll add yes in certain places. I do like the idea of there being like decadent poetry houses where you've got like these mad people who like go and listen to recitations every night or whatever.
Wonderful.
Then
that's fabulous, actually.
Is this magic regulated, controlled, or taught? And the answers are no. No, with few exceptions. Yes, it is taught. If so, by what entity? Yes, it is controlled. If so, by what entity? And yes, it is regulated. If so, by what entity?
Okay, so we do have it being taught because we have this like cultural expectation that you will at some point in your education create a small magic to show that you have learned this skill, whether or not you choose to follow that path afterwards. Good question about whether it's regulated. I think that there's like definitely an element of like social regulation, like people in the same way that we have social ideas about what politeness is and like what is appropriate in what context. So there's that kind of like cultural ideas around it. I don't think that there is, and there's probably like laws about the more egregious forms of it.
Yes.
Yeah,
it's not fair to say that human interaction is regulated because we don't allow people to hit each other. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I do want to say that I like the idea of it being at least a little bit controlled. I want to introduce publishing houses because
must we okay, go ahead.
we must and we must because people can be affected by reading these works, which means mass printing is a thing, and that must be like its own special kind of ceremony, and it probably takes a lot of resources. So
priests.
That means like you really like you have to go.
Church. That's what the church is.
Yeah, it's certainly what the church is. Hey, it's also what my lovely publisher is in a way, because like all publishers and imprints and for that matter to a certain degree editors decide what is going to be mass produced and what is not. And I definitely like the idea of there being a separation in some way between a manuscript work and a mass published work. Like I have to imagine the mainstream spells, like if you mass publish a spell, it's probably not the same as like reading the manuscript. The same as like if you listen to an audio book, it's not the same as attending a reading with the author and so on and so forth.
Yes, that's very good. That's very good.
So yeah, there's definitely some kind of corporate body that decides what gets mass produced and what doesn't, which that puts a delicious tension in this world.
It does, and my immediate question is, what does indie publishing look like in this setting?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I was thinking about all this, like thinking about like regulation and control, and how people at protests definitely read angry poetry. Like there's some cool stuff in there. Oof.
That's very good.
And the answer, the last question is this magic hidden or kept secret? The potential answers are no, yes, to keep practitioners safe, yes, to keep non-practitioners safe, yes, to control power. And I'm going to say, like, oof, I don't know.
I'm sort of like halfway between the first two. Like, I think that, like, obviously everybody knows about this. And so everybody who's educated, who's been to school, has made at least like one magical thing in their life. I think that maybe how about this? How about, like, there's an element of protection while you're in the process of making it. Like, while you're in the middle of, like, because we have those costs of, like, time and, like, emotion and vulnerability and intimacy and all of that stuff, like, while you're writing it, like, there has to be, like, some element of protection around you. Or while you're in the middle of reciting this spell, you're more vulnerable for some reason, and so there has to be some kind of protection around you then. I like that too, because it brings kind of like an element of community to it as well, because writing is so lonely sometimes. And like I've often said, like, I've never written a book by myself. Like, it takes a village. You know, there have always been people around me who helped me by listening to me, or comforting me when it was hard, or helping me work through plot problems. And so I kind of like bringing that idea of, like, there has to be people around you who are, like, helping you through it and protecting you from this vulnerability. What you are vulnerable to, I'm not sure. Maybe you have an answer for that, but that's what I've got for that so far.
Well, I mean, I was thinking, like, you know, if you are embarking on writing any work, like if there is a rival author, for instance, a rival poet, like, if they know you're working on something, they could mess with you because you might take those emotions into your work. Like, you're trying to cultivate a particular experience within yourself and within your work. That seems important. There's also a part of me that wants to add some more strife and tension into this world, and be like, there is this practice of, like, anonymity and secrecy. Maybe it's again a little weird and shameful in the way that we look, unfortunately, in our society, as some creative endeavors is a little weird and shameful. But also, I think the corporate entities that mass produce this magic have like created a pen name sort of system. It's like, maybe originally it was to protect beloved authors. Like, you know, they have to publish under a pen name because if somebody goes and finds, you know, a particular author, they could really, you know, want to mess with them because of how invested they are in this work. So the corporation's like, hey, we've solved that problem. Everybody uses a pen name, which means everybody is in some degree separated from their work. And, like, the publishing house.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. Like, there are ghostwriters. There are people who cycle through. Like, the same author has been writing for 100 years because they're just having people try and imitate that style and whatnot. This
is good. This is opening up a lot of questions about what plagiarism looks like in this world. Because what you are talking about is called reverse plagiarism, which was super popular in the medieval period, where a bunch of people, like, if you wanted your work to be widely read, you would just put by Chaucer on it, right? And say, like, hey, guys, I found a new story by Chaucer.
I mean, that's just smart.
Right. Like, we wouldn't.
Hey, also the co-author on this book was Chaucer. So if you were into the Canterbury Tales, pick up the Ultimate RPG Game Master's Worldbuilding Guide, because Chaucer was involved.
That's funny that you mentioned that, because Chaucer was also the co-author of my book.
Yeah, and not the boring real Chaucer. It was the Chaucer from A Knight's Tale.
From A Knight's Tale.
Yeah,
you get me, James. You get me absolutely. This all okay. So it brings up interesting ideas about what plagiarism looks like. It also means that book signings are not a thing, because you're never going to be able to. Well, okay, so you might be able to meet your favorite author, but it's kind of like a taboo thing, and like certainly if you do it through the major publishing houses, like that's quite separated, right? Like,
oh yeah,
yeah. And so it would really be like, and that kind of brings in another thing about like the it being illegal to recite your poetry on the street, like that kind of might be sort of culturally like seeing someone with their pants fall down, right? You're like embarrassed for them and you're shocked a little bit, right?
I mean, it's literally the experience of seeing someone recite poetry in the streets, so that's fine.
I mean, yes, that's very true.
That really makes me think about like the act of signing a work to someone being so personal, because I do love getting my favorite books signed by my favorite authors, but in this world, the author is kind of signing, in a way, this experience is yours. Like, this book and the story in it, like they're validating your journey with their spell, which is so cool.
So, okay, this is actually fascinating with what we've built, because like we said that the mass produced ones maybe have like a different effect or a slightly less weighty effect than the actual manuscript did, but like getting the work signed by the author, right? Like having them touch it and hold it must give it like some kind of extra, like maybe not quite the same as like the original manuscript, but like some kind of little extra oomph, because like it affects you, the work affected you so intimately and so personally that you sought them out. And in this world, you would have to go to like quite a lot of trouble to actually seek them out in person to get this signed and have this like connection with them. And then like every time you read that book afterwards, you were to get the effect of whatever the spell was, like you would have the memory of that experience. And like that has to be magical in some way.
Right? Absolutely. Like, and you know, that you had mentioned like wedding vows earlier. Like, it all seems like it's part of it. That's very, very cool. This brings us now that we have taken our little quiz, we get the joy of answering 2 questions, and we only get 2 of these questions. So the questions are as follows. What is a folk belief or superstition related to this magic? What is a profession or institution that depends on this magic? How has society developed differently because of this magic? What can these practitioners offer the world that others can't? Where might someone learn this magic? When would someone seek out a practitioner?
I think that we've answered quite a lot of those already, but I think that I'm particularly drawn to when might someone seek out a practitioner, because that's interesting. Like, what if you need, we haven't talked about what this magic actually does. We haven't talked about like what the effects of any of these spells are. Whatever, doesn't matter. It doesn't
at this point. It doesn't matter. We can get into that later.
It's about the vibe. But like, what if you do need a spell for something, and you are seeking someone out to commission them to make a spell for you? So that's a question that compels me. How about you pick out the other question?
Folk belief or superstition.
Okay, I think that's a good one too.
It's good to me. And that is. Ooh, I like the idea that there is a belief that if you read all of someone's work, you can truly know them. Which I think it gets at a little bit of the unhealthy parasocial attachment that people can have.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, but there's a lot to that I think is just
Yeah,
fun, and
yeah.
I don't even know if it's true. I don't know if that's a true thing.
But that's the folk belief, right?
Yeah,
Right. And I think that that's also very real. I think that like even in the real world, we kind of have a belief about that. Like the more that you read of someone, the more glimpses of their soul that you get to see, and the more you must know about them as a person.
hmm
And like sometimes it's true, and sometimes it's really not, because there have been times when I read a book and I was like, "This is amazing. The author must be just so incredibly kind to write a book like this." And sometimes that is true and sometimes it's not. Sometimes they're just very good at writing and they're actually a dick in real life. Anyway, so but that's a good folk belief, yes. Um, so when might someone seek out a practitioner then? Like what contexts might that happen in? Um,
gosh,
I think
gosh,
I think I think wedding vows, like we come back to that. Like there must be like major life events where like you hire someone to write a poem at the birth of your child or for your wedding vows or at for your grandfather's funeral or something like that, so that like the
absolutely.
people who are there and like celebrating this with you can like get a little bit of the effect and like hear the spell.
Yeah, I definitely think that that's the case. I feel like the idea of like a self-help genre existing, like if you've got a particular problem, like
Sure.
this magic being a very fascinating therapeutic tool
Yeah.
could be cool.
And here's the question. Are we seeking out the practitioner themselves, or are we seeking out the spell that will fit the situation in which we're
Yeah.
doing it? Because like we can mass produce spells, right? Because we
hmm
can print them like books. So are I guess it depends on probably like privilege and access and a lot of things. Like maybe it would be quite expensive and time consuming and tricky to like find the actual person who is doing this,
hmm
especially someone talented enough to do a spell that you really want. um but so most people might just like, here's a book of spells that are good for weddings, here's a book of spells that are good for like
Yeah.
birthdays, things like
Yeah,
that.
because reciting
um
is part of it. Like you
yeah,
can,
yeah.
yeah. Like definitely. I think if
And everyone has
you,
access.
yeah,
Yeah.
you like you might even commission someone to write a common thing. Like if there is a common
Yeah.
poem or something, like commissioning someone to write it so that you have their manuscript
Oh,
to recite, like that might be better than getting a mass produced one. Like,
that's actually interesting because we've been talking so much about like writing as kind of like the abstract of writing, but the actual act of writing, like someone makes you a beautiful calligraphy scroll for your wedding. And like that is the it's kind of like the magical object itself. It gets a little bit more into like the artisanal side
well, yeah,
of
like
writing. Yeah.
because the things that we chose were intimacy and creativity.
Yeah.
So like that feels like that's all dimensions that are part of it.
Yeah. That makes
Um,
sense. Cool.
all right, that's very cool. We come now to mastery,
All right.
the final pillar here. Um, and we have to answer the following questions to help shape our concept of mastery for this path. And, this separates, like, what makes someone a, renowned and powerful author versus
Mm.
someone who's, mucking about and, like, isn't going to be very serious about this, or someone who very passionately believes that this is going to be their thing, but maybe doesn't have all their stuff together yet. Um, and the questions that we have are is mastery over this artisan magic permanent, or does it ebb and flow as a practitioner grows and matures? I kind of think it's got to
Ooh.
ebb and flow. Like that's
I
that's
think,
how.
yeah, yeah. I mean, yes, because I was about to say, oh well, like once you know how to write, you know how to write. But also, sometimes you write something and it's not as good as the last thing, and that is a thing that happens and it sucks, but it's real.
Yeah, I've
Yeah, I
certainly
think
sat down to that computer and gone, have I ever written a word in my life? I don't know.
no, I don't think I have. I have these 4 books that I've published, but I don't remember how it happened. Yes. I'm kind of in the middle of that right now, actually. I'm like, do I know how to write a book? No, I don't. Um, yeah, and I think that that ties in with like the emotional cost too, because like when you sit down to do it, you don't know if it's going to be as good as the last thing you did. And that's sort of like an element of the stress and the emotional cost that it takes to do it. Like you can't count just on your mastery in order to like make this beautiful piece of magic and art. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is heartbreaking and beautiful.
Whew, the
Yeah,
hay isn't art.
yeah.
Okay, so the next one is
Feel like we're
does
going through therapy with this magic system, James. I feel like we're
create
confronting a lot
hey,
of stuff here.
which means this is going to be a very powerful thing at the
Yes.
end of the
Yes,
day.
indeed. Yes,
Um,
indeed.
so does this discipline depend more on inflexible foundations or subjective creativity? And
This is all subjective.
this feels very difficult to
Yeah.
answer. I think like
Yeah.
on a certain level, like language is dependent on certain inflexible elements in that like we're using words and these words mean things, but we can also change the meaning of words as we write them and create
Yeah.
new associations between them. Like it's tough. There is a structure to language and writing, but there is also a completely subjective element to it.
Yeah. 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 Um, like, and also there's the element of like personal taste too. Like probably you're not going to be as affected by a spell if it's not to your taste, right?
Mm,
Like
yeah.
because it requires like sort of emotional vulnerability from the recipient as well, right? Like you have to be willing to open up your heart and like let this spell into you. And the same with like the audience who's listening to someone recite it. Like you have to be there, you have to be open to it. And if it's not done very well, or if it's not the sort of thing that you like, then it's just going to be harder for you to open yourself up to it on that level. So there's like that element of subjectiveness as well.
Yeah. So I feel like we just
Yeah.
get a spectrum out of that question.
Yeah.
Then are masters limited by the same factors that govern potency for other practitioners? Um, so yeah, like once you reach a certain level, do the rules change for you?
Yes, because once you like when you're learning something, especially like writing and storytelling, like you learn kind of what the rules are, and then once you're good at those, you can start breaking them in interesting creative ways, right? And that's something that happens with all art. Like you learn how to like when you sit down to learn how to draw, for example, you learn how to draw a sphere with a shadow. So you know how shadows work, right? You learn
Mm-hmm.
that rule. And then once you get good at it, you don't have to rely on that rule so much because part of it is a little bit more instinctive. And also, you know how to squish the rule a little bit and in what contexts you can break it or bend it to have the effect that you want. And what the exceptions are for the rule. So yeah, I think that.
Yeah. Oh man. Is a master more likely to influence their discipline through work or through teaching?
Ooh,
Boy,
ooh.
that feels like that breaks down to a spectrum too.
I
Like,
would agree. I would agree. It's going to depend on the person because there's some people who are just like amazing teachers and that was their contribution, and there's some people who like the first person to have that pen name that people have been using for hundreds of years, right? Like the original Chaucer, shall we say?
mm-hmm.
um, yeah, I think I would agree. That's a spectrum.
And what aspects of this magic can't be taught?
Mm. Shit. Well, the all the intimacy and emotional stuff, really, like that's
Yeah.
kind of a personal journey that you have to go through. That's something that you like. People can try to teach you that. People can like explain it in a classroom and tell you like what you need to do, but like the journey up the mountain, no one is going to take the same path to get to the top of the mountain. And you can look at someone on another path and say like, oh, there's like a big pothole in front of you, you have to jump over it, but they might not be in a place where they can hear that and receive that. It's an experience that they have to go through themselves.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah.
All right, with those questions answered and all that in mind, we now have to identify, create 3 pillars of mastery for this. Like 3 things, and there can be more things that we know of, but these are 3 general traits that separate someone who has mastered this craft from someone who hasn't. I think the first for me is a real emotional clarity in your work. I think a lot about the edgy fan fiction that I would read like back as a teenager, and like how a lot of that was shocking work designed to provoke a reaction rather than authentic work that provokes a reaction from its audience. And that feels to me kind of an ineffable like line that you cross eventually as a creative, of being able to like authentically produce something versus like seeing that a work can affect someone, deciding you want that power for yourself and chasing it in a hollow way.
Right.
So yeah, that's the first one that I could think of.
Okay. The thing that's springing to my mind, and I'm going to plagiarize from my own work here, you know that line in Conspiracy about it doesn't matter if it happened that way in real life as long as the story is good, as long as it's truer than truth?
Yeah.
There you go. Like it's like that kind of like the emotional authenticity, but also like how weighty and real the story feels. Like it has to feel like something tangible, and it takes a long time to like learn how to do that, to make it feel like something that really happened or something that could really happen, even if it's like completely fantastical.
I like that.
Yeah.
Oh, I kind of want a pillar of mastery to be endurance in a way.
Yes,
In the idea,
yes.
like, and this might also like dovetail into the idea of being prolific as well. Like, I look at some of my favorite authors who have done things, and like Terry Pratchett wrote 2 books a year pretty consistently for an extremely long time, and I look at that and go, how? And I feel like that is an ineffable like sense of mastery. Like, well, that's Terry Pratchett. Like, you got to be Terry Pratchett to do that.
Yep.
So.
Yes. Yes. And also like not just the like going back to the other thing you said about the emotional authenticity, like there's an element of knowing yourself as well. Like it's not just about putting it on the page, it's about like your own vulnerability to yourself. You have to be able to like confront what's in you.
Yeah.
Which is not like magical, but it's a little bit magical. You get me?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, like, there are so many parallels between this magic and like actual writing, and it definitely feels that way so much. I look at people who have that quality and go, oh boy, I don't know how I could ever be that. So yeah, for sure.
Cool.
Well then,
that's great. This is a lot. Yeah.
So yeah, then that is the that element of the magic system. Now, dear listeners out there, you might be thinking like, well, you've developed a magic system, but as you pointed out earlier, we don't even know what this magic does or what you can accomplish with these spells. And I'd say, dear reader, you are correct.
Yes.
Because the idea of this existing is something that you, as a game master or collaborator in your game, you can take this and framework whatever you need onto it. Like if you're playing a game where you need to go on fantasy adventures and huck fireballs around, can a poem be a bomb? Of course. Of course it can.
I think absolutely.
Yeah. But if like we are playing in the millennial ass world that we're, working with, and like we really want to talk about like escapist fantasy or whatnot, could reading a novel literally feel like it transports you to another world, like, yeah, it's kind of however you want to engage with that in your game, or if you are writing in your story. And what this Pathways of Magic thing does is sort of break it down and provide you a framework that you can then place your needs on top of. And there's some juicy stuff in here. But the world is yet larger than this, Alex, because we are about to define legendary magic that also exists in this world, which might frame...
Oh, this is the same world. Okay.
I feel like it should be the same world.
I think it can be. Yeah.
Okay. So now we have to decide whether we shall roll or choose one of the what did I call this? The sources for legendary magic.
Okay.
And I will again read through the options here. So to remind everyone, legendary magic, I'll read the little blurb. Legendary magic is an expression of the powerful themes at the heart of the world. It is the sort of magic that moves a story or defines the lessons someone should take away from a story. It's more likely to use the characters than be used by them. So the sources that we have here are irony. This is an almost vindictive edge to magic. It works like a kind of retroactive moralizing force, dealing out justice to evildoers and bittersweet rewards to tragic heroes. There is fate, having magic be the manifestation of the guiding hand of destiny. It shapes events through subtle influence more than overt displays of force. However, there is a sense of inevitability, which makes it insurmountable. There is poetry. Magic stems from a kind of romantic storytelling logic. There is the reason that a true love's kiss can break a curse, or a king's broken promise can topple an empire. This source works miracles that are reinforcing the core themes of the world. Then we've got straight up gods. This magic is the result of the divine. It follows the will and action of divine beings in a detached and impersonal way. There is folkways. Magic is tied to folk tales and cultural practices of different people in the world. It follows the logic it follows the logic of myths and upholds values and cultures over the lives of people living them. This is the kind of magic that fuels the curse of an ancient king or holds a storm from ravaging a sacred temple. And finally, there is axiom. Magic is the expression of cosmic principles through individuals. Practitioners manifest the power of the universe through their connection to it, seemingly defying natural laws. Unlike truths in arcane magic, we haven't read the arcane magic section, so we wouldn't know. But yeah, that is legendary magic through a absolute connection to the universe itself.
Those are all also extremely good. I think we need to roll for it again.
Let's roll for it.
Because that worked out really well for us before. If it turns up fate, then I'm going to laugh a lot.
That would be very good.
It would be very good and very appropriate. How many?
This is a D6. They're all going to be also D6s for sources.
Great. All right, here we go. 3.
That is poetry.
Okay, that kind of fits in. So this is like fairy tale rules. Like there's fairy tale law in place, or storybook law.
Well, it's slightly. I would almost define fairy tale as closer to irony. Well, yeah. I guess they're
like you go on an adventure. Yeah.
I guess I suppose I associate fairy tales with being meaner, but you're absolutely right. It is I feel like poetry kind of has an inherent sense of justice woven into it, and it breaks down to the more right something feels, the more true it is.
Okay, that fits in. So when I say like fairy tale logic, it's like you help the old lady you run into on the road, and like you share your meal with her, because later on she's going to like help you accomplish the impossible task that the evil king set you.
Yes.
Right. It's stuff like that. Like you know that the world works in these sorts of ways. It's a little bit serendipity as well. Like you do what good that you can because you know that the universe is kind of going to bring it back to you later.
Perfect. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we've got that makes sense. Which means we now get to determine the cost of legendary magic. Legendary magic is unique in that there is no cost associated with it.
Okay, that makes
Like
sense.
the other paths of magic, they have more reliable and transactional relationships with practitioners. But by its nature, legendary magic cannot operate this way. So instead, there are narrative rules which govern its appearance. So
Yep.
we're going to choose 2 rules that determine when legendary magic can enter the story.
Okay.
And the rules that we have are healing. Legendary magic appears to mend broken pieces after a great struggle. Faith. Legendary magic is only available to those who are able to demonstrate unshakable belief in the underlying themes of the world. Unlikeliness. Legendary magic only appears based on a 1,000,000 to 1 chance. Last hope. Legendary magic appears when all other options are exhausted. And omnipresent. Legendary magic is always present and working, but in ways so subtle that it appears to be absent.
Okay. What was the first one again?
The first one was mending, was healing.
Oh,
So
healing. Sorry, what
yeah.
was the second one?
Second one is faith. If you
Faith. Okay.
believe in the themes of the world, the magic will support you.
I kind of feel a little bit like that one. I mean, I liked a lot of them, so maybe you can
Yeah, we'll do
narrow it down.
we'll each pick one.
Yeah, I like faith because I like the idea that like you run into the old lady on the road, and if you know storybook rules, right, you know I share my meal with her. Like I help her out. I help her cross the street because like I know that it might not be exactly her who's going to help me later, but somehow the good that I put into the world is going to come back to me. And like
Yeah,
believing in that makes it true.
I like that too. In that we have a like our world, there is a lot of what we're dealing with that is people relating to themselves and relating to other people, and there's a sense of unscrupulous forces trying to control or redirect that. And I have to imagine that like part of the idea of like writing a novel that is a magic spell is like literally casting a spell to change the world that is the
Yeah,
novel.
yeah,
So faith feels good for that.
yeah.
And that, to go along with that, to fit into this world, I kind of want it to be last hope. That, like,
Okay.
the idea that the universe only provides a solution to you when there aren't other solutions. Like,
Mm,
everything else feels driven because that puts the burden kind of on the
on
people in
you.
this world, and it explains why
Yeah.
there is so much injustice in a world that is underwritten by poetry. Like,
Yeah.
there's bad things happen because heroes need to exist, and that means that you have to be a hero, which is not an easy thing to be. So yeah, that is the cost. Then we get to potency, which is also different for legendary magic, in that there are no factors that make it more or less powerful, just ones that determine how obvious and understandable its influence is.
Okay.
Like there's no the real magic at the core of Narnia. There isn't one spell that's more important than the other. They're all more important. So we get to choose one here. And these are rules for how we can tell it's working. And the rules can be: no one can be sure that that it was present at all. Only the wise and skilled see it for what it is. Only the main characters, I have it written as the PCs, but only the main characters understand it, and they must keep it secret. Only the main characters understand it, and they must try to explain it. Or it is obvious, dramatic, and undeniable.
I kind of really like the last one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that
Like a
is cool.
miracle happens to you, and it's like a roll of thunder goes through the world, and like maybe not every last person in the world knows about it, right? That would be a little bit straining, but like anyone who was around and witnessed it knew what it was and knew what happened and knew that the universe just like reached out and put its hand on your shoulder for a moment.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
good. That's good shit.
Ooh. I like that a lot because that means like a really canny villain in this world needs to shore up enough power that they can't really be attacked, but also not so much that they're invulnerable because they know if they do become that, the universe will just smite them. Uh, which, ooh,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
an
yeah.
exciting thing for a villain to have to
That's
think about.
fun. That's fun. Yeah.
Um, so
Billionaires, they're bad.
yeah, so there are some commonality and accessibility questions that we have to ask ourselves in relation to legendary magic. So we will return once again to our quiz. And the question is, are people aware of this magic? Uh,
I
that
think
like,
yes.
okay. And do we think it's as fact, as stories or rumor, or only privileged groups?
As stories and rumor make sense here,
Yeah, I think so.
because like because it's a last hope. So there's like cultural beliefs around the you help the old lady on the road because she'll help you later, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that's something that it's so subtle sometimes you don't know if that's like actual serendipity or if it's like magical serendipity. You don't know that for sure, but then those moments of last hope when like something huge and profound like happens, like a miracle happens right in front of you, like that's going to happen so rarely that
Mm-hmm.
it would only be in songs and stories that people would know about it.
Yeah, yeah. And I have to imagine in people's writing, depending on what
Yeah.
works affect you, you might believe more or less in those
Right.
miracles.
Right.
Um, uh, who can use this magic? I mean, like because it's the type of magic that it is, kind of everyone and also no one at the same
No one.
time.
Yes. Yes.
Um, some of these are less relevant to
To
legendary magic.
legendary.
Is
Yeah.
is this
Because
considered
it's so
acceptable?
numinous.
Yeah, like
It's just like all numinous. Yeah.
um yeah. So I feel like we've answered the only really relevant question for that. So then we'll go down to, I just have to go back to the legendary section. And we get to answer our questions again. And what folk belief or superstition is related to this magic? What profession or institution depends on this magic? How has society developed differently because of this magic? What historical event did this magic shape? What figure is associated with this magic? So we get to choose two of those to answer.
I love historical event,
Mm-hmm.
and you can pick the second one.
Um, I'll go with a figure associated with
Okay.
this magic.
Okay.
Um, oh, okay. So let's go back to the Epic of Gilgamesh
Oh,
for a
sure.
minute
Please,
here.
please, yes. I'm always ready to do that.
So my queer ass in high school loved the Epic of Gilgamesh, and I loved Enkidu
Oh yeah.
as like a figure, and I definitely reading all of the fan fictions that I was reading at that time in my life. I was a big Gilgamesh Enkidu shipper for sure, and of course the message of this story is that death happens and death is a reality.
Uh-huh.
And that's a difficult thing to deal with. That being the first story, I kind of think there is the idea that the first stories that existed shaped the world, and that
Mm,
Gilgamesh, in writing his own story, made death a real and necessary thing. So he's like,
Ooh.
yeah,
Ooh.
kind of a hated figure in the world for that reason.
Oh, interesting. Or at least like a controversial figure,
Yeah,
right? Because
yeah.
like death isn't always a bad thing, right? Like sometimes death can be a release, and if we didn't have death, then we wouldn't have birth, and we wouldn't have like a changing, ever growing, evolving world. It would be much more static than it is. And sometimes, and there's like the metaphorical death as well. Like sometimes part of you needs to figuratively die so that you can grow into the new person that you're going to be. I think that's very good.
Yeah.
Um, for historical event, um, I kind of think that there was like a battle of some sort where all hope seemed lost and like the evil empire was going to invade, and at the
Mm.
last moment, like this miracle came down and the mountain fell on top of them, and or something like that, or something happened to stop this.
Yeah, I like that. I like this being a semi modern event, like, so
Yeah,
that there are a lot of
it was
people
it
that
was
try to
within,
provide logical explanations for this.
right, like it was within recorded history, but
Hmm.
it wasn't like modern.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Mhm.
yeah, and so everyone is like telling all these stories about like, well, here's how it could have happened, and we don't really have an explanation. Everyone who was there swears it was a miracle. And like, what do you do with that? And how do you make sense of that? And how do you live in that world and kind of interface with being in a world where that can happen?
Yeah, yeah. Like, and one of the things that I always ask myself, like when I am reading a piece of fantasy fiction wherein the characters don't believe in something, that something has
Yeah.
happened, I always go, "You live in a world with magic. Why on earth are you suspending your belief now? Like, you have the perfect excuse to believe all sorts of things."
Yeah.
Um, so the idea that we're aware of magic and what it is and how it works, like it is something that can be put into words and understanding and shared in those ways, and it doesn't do these things. Like, nobody yeah, I guess that creates another rule for our writing magic. Nobody has written the work that can make a mountain fall, as far
Yeah.
as we know. That
Yeah.
that is just not a thing that can be accomplished.
I think the writing magic is much more internal magic. Like you can affect people, you can't so much affect the world.
Yeah, yeah, you can affect society, you can
Yeah.
affect people on an individual level, but like
Yeah.
you can't
You can change
drop a
minds and
mountain.
hearts, but you
Yeah.
can't drop them out. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So that's, yeah, that is their explanation for, this can't be magic. Why people don't believe this can't be magic, because magic doesn't work like that. We know how magic works, and it
Yeah.
doesn't do those things.
And
That's
that
great.
contrasts well because that's like the hard magic versus the soft magic. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as like the hard, referring to it, our magic
Hard
is
magic.
hard in like the shell around a toasted marshmallow. There is a
Yes.
crust,
Yes. 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 Yes.
but a
Yes.
gooey center. All right. So then that brings us to mastery, and of course, legendary magic cannot be mastered. Uh, the Let's see. When a being assumes legendary power, they become a legend themselves. They feel less
Mm-hmm.
like an individual being and more like a vessel for the power and will of the universe. So we answered these questions instead of defining pillars of mastery. Have there been masters of legendary magic in your world, and what deeds have they done? Well, we already know about Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh is the person who invented death, who
Yeah.
wrote that epic and therefore created that rule.
Mm.
It's contested whether or not this person was a person who existed for people, but we know that that definitely happened. Let's see. Are there any masters of legendary magic who are currently active in the world? Alexandra, I gotta
Ooh,
throw that to you.
ooh. I think that so for the one that there's the two approaches. There's the last hope is there's no way to prove that. Like it either
Hmm.
happens to you or it doesn't. There's no way to control it. The one for like this more the storybook kind
Hmm.
of rules, maybe, but it's so numinous and so squishy and so uncertain that you wouldn't know. Like maybe there is here's a fun thing. There could be a master of this, but they might not even know that they are a master of it.
Ooh, yeah, that's true. That's true. I feel like that is right and proper.
Yeah.
There is also a part of me who just loves the idea of like a romantic trickster, like just being a
Oh yes.
person who exists. Like there is legitimately some sort of immortal wandering being in this universe that like asks you for $3, and if you give it to them, something a good turn will come your way. Like
Hmm.
I like that very
Have you been
much.
reading my books? Have you been reading my books, Stephen James? Shugwa is in this world. Cool,
Hmm.
good.
Hmm.
Yeah. All right. Hmm.
um all right, then
So like
do
semi-divine. This is kind
yeah,
of bringing in a little bit of the divine then.
well
Because like,
yeah, a connection to legendary magic, like thinking
yeah,
of a figure who is a master of legendary magic. They are a person and not a person because they
right,
are a vessel for the world to speak.
right.
So
Like
yeah,
you receive this power and you kind of um the way that I would word it in my books is that you kind of like get shoved like 3 inches out of the world, where you're in the world, but you're not quite in the world anymore. And yeah, that's good actually. I like that. I like that.
yeah, that's cool. So yeah, we could have some active legends, which is great. Um, do beings have to be worthy of legendary magic, or can it work through anyone?
I think based on like the poetry rules that we have, there is and like the storybook fairy tale law kind of. I think that there does have to be an element of like you do have to narratively have earned it in some way. Maybe not necessarily like I don't want to say this is only for good people because that's going to like get into like a whole morality thing.
For
But
sure.
so it's not so much about being worthy, it's about having earned it through,
Yeah.
yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, yeah, it does, because I keep thinking of the villain who is
Yeah,
aware of the themes of the universe and
right,
manipulates them to be a better villain.
right.
And there is a certain sense of I will step into the role of the perfect villain because it exists and somebody's
Hmm.
got to do it. So
Yeah.
yeah, can a being temporarily wield legendary magic, or does it require a permanent transformation?
I think yes. I think it can be temporary. Sometimes like it just comes upon you and you have this moment that you can't explain, right? And something happens. That's kind of like the last hope
Yeah,
example. Yeah.
for sure. Like I'm thinking of like if Gilgamesh is a legend in that they lived and wrote this story and therefore made it true. Like, is
Mm.
there a separation between legendary magic kind of happening to you and existing within your life and you being a legend then? Like, that might be getting like too far into the hairy weeds, but yeah, I do
Yeah.
like the idea that like you hold some echo of the universe and even be a part of a legendary story, and then you put it down.
Yeah,
Not
and
everything.
you have to kind of that's interesting because then you kind of have to confront like I held this great power. I glimpsed the scope of the universe, and now I have to like go to the grocery store and do the dishes. Like, how do I come back to Earth and like live as a normal person after experiencing that? Yeah, that's
God,
fun.
yeah.
That's cool.
Hmm.
Yeah,
There must be some person who did hold that mantle and wrote an auto bio about it. I
yeah.
just love that. Um, Okay. Then the last question is: does legendary magic typically solve or create problems? And I think for us, that answer is pretty obvious. It typically solves problems.
I think so. I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so those are the magic systems. Let me do a quick time check here. We're at an hour 30. So we could either call it here because I think we've done lovely work, or we could hunt around for another exercise to add a little bit more to the world. It's kind of how you feeling?
I'm down to do another exercise. Should we check in with the chat to see if they have any questions about what we've done so far,
Yeah,
or
chat.
anything else?
I think that is a perfect opportunity. The chat. Let's see. I'll read back to see if there were any questions
I
here.
skimmed a little bit. I hadn't seen any. Someone asked a while ago if they could get a link to the book, and someone else posted it. Thank you for doing that.
That's good. Someone said gender magic, which is a fascinating idea.
Love that.
Yeah. So I don't see any real questions. So like if there are things that you would like to see now that we kind of, it feels like we have a slightly magical realist kind of modern setting for our world that has a history of legends of our world kind of being more real than they ever were. And those creating the foundational stories that wrote the rules for our universe. So let's hunt around, and I'll see if there's anything that feels like a good match for that. I'm gonna look at the setting neutral things here. Okay.
This is really fun so far, by the way.
Yeah,
I'm enjoying it.
I've had such a blast doing this with you. This is
Yeah.
definitely a fun exercise, and I hope listeners are getting kind of an idea of how the book works. You know, I'll point out that was only part of that exercise. There are, you know, 4 other paths of magic, and each one of them, like depending on the source and depending on like the choices that you make along the way, they would look extremely different from one another.
Yeah.
Reading through this, there is the big bad where we could put a villain in this world, which might be interesting. There is also, I guess, the prize or the one thing to rule them all. Both of those exercises are about creating like kind of a magical object. We define rules for it based on priorities, and we just drop them into the world and see what kind of chaos it could create.
I kind of like that one. That one sounds fun.
Okay, so the difference between the prize and one thing to rule them all. One thing to rule them all is kind of like creating a weapon or a tool, an object to a very specific purpose that would probably be part of a heroic quest. It is a MacGuffin machine, whereas the prize is creating simply something that is extremely sought after and valuable, and defining different elements of that.
Either of them sound good. Which do you like?
I wanna let's do the prize here. Let's jump in on the prize. So the way this exercise works is I've taken the idea of something valuable in fiction and broken it down to like treasure that you would have for your adventuring party, and I've broken it down into its rarity, its utility, its tradability, its mobility, and reputation. And we are going to assign priorities to those different categories, deciding which ones are more important than the others. And we then will read the results of the priorities that we have assigned, and that will determine the parameters of what the object is. And then we'll kind of be able to like zoom in on exactly what it is by definition.
This is very good. I already have like 4 ideas for it. One of them is the cuneiform tablet that has the original Epic of Gilgamesh on it. One of them is the Book of Kells. I could go on. Yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah.
So yeah, exactly. So for our thing, well, I guess we will just. I'm looking for a writing utensil. I had a big mug of pens right next to me,
I
but
have
I must
pens and things. I have things.
Okay. So then we'll trade off. I want to. I'll ask, and if you want expanded definitions for any of these categories, please let me know. The idea is we're going to rate these from 1 to 5. On a 1, that will determine that is the most important aspect that this prize has. It is the most advantageous to anybody who would be seeking it out. And 5 is actually adding actual problems to this thing. It would be like, this is the weakest thing. This is the least desirable trait that this prize has. So based on that information, what do you think? So
for example, hold on. I just want to make sure I understand this. So like a 5 would be like, if you possess the Book of Kells, your breath smells really bad all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Like even like a 5 in like looking at rarity as a category. The 1 would be, this prize is singular. There is nothing like it anywhere else in the universe. It might be the product of an unequaled historical event, a remarkable being, et cetera, and a 5 is there's very little unusual about this prize, but that doesn't mean it's useless. Its value doesn't come from it being difficult to find. Yeah. So what do you want to be the most important quality for this? Its rarity, its utility, its tradability, its mobility, or reputation?
I kind of feel like reputation fits in with what we have built before with everything else.
Yeah.
So reputation is most important. Okay.
Reputation's most important. Then I want to define what is least important here.
Okay.
And gosh, that is actually tough. I'm going to go with tradability. I'm going to say that, yeah, this isn't something that really is valuable because people want to trade it. So then for decide, do you want to go high? Do you want to go low? Do you want to be in the middle? Because we're defining things 1 to 5 here. So we've still got 2, 3, and 4.
I'll do 2.
Mm-hmm.
What was the other things?
There is utility, mobility, and reputation or rarity. Yeah, it's rarity, mobility, and utility.
I think rarity is going to be the next one, because I think that these are kind of like there aren't many of them. Like there's more than one, right? There's like more than one of them in the world, but there's not more than one Book of Kells. There's not more than one Gilgamesh cuneiform tablet, right?
Yeah.
So there's like different examples of the thing, but each of those specific ones are unique.
Yeah.
In some way. Yeah.
Okay,
so this is rarity.
So then I'm going to go right for 3. I want the utility to be a 3. I want that to be kind of middle of the road for how useful it is.
And then that's mobility for 4, right?
Mobility for 4. All right. So our 1 was reputation. So this prize is a household name in many places, and if people see it, there's a very good chance they'll know what it is. Almost everyone finds some novelty in the prestige of owning or interacting with it, even if they don't have a use for it.
That makes sense. That fits in. Yep.
The next...
And rarity was 2.
Yeah, that's rarity. This prize is extraordinary, and there are only a handful of things like it anywhere in the world. Maybe it was part of a rare collection. a prototype in a line of experimental goods, a possession of an important historical figure, or a personal piece of a PC's history. Unless you dedicate your life to searching it, it's unlikely that you'll find something like this again.
Also makes sense. Very good. Number 3 was utility.
Utility, this prize is useful, but it might require the PCs to change their plans or adapt their lifestyles. Depending on how far out of their way they're willing to go, it could still be an asset. No matter what, its utility makes it valuable to someone.
Okay.
And
Number 4 was mobility.
this prize...
Which is, it's hard to transport this, right?
This prize is not mobile in a traditional sense. A mine is a perfect example of this prize. You can absolutely move what people find valuable, but it requires a complex operation and lots of specialty equipment or expertise.
That also makes sense if these are like artifacts, because like you can't really transport a cuneiform tablet just willy-nilly. You can't like shove it in your backpack. It takes like time to plan it and careful packing, and you don't necessarily want to move it because it's so delicate.
I would almost argue that that would be the level 3 of
That would be 3?
mobility.
Okay.
So this is even
So
worse
maybe
than
this
that.
is even more.
This is
Okay.
going off of cuneiform tablet. This is kind of like the writing on the wall of a tomb. It's like you can't move the whole wall. You might be able to go in there and read what it says and recite it, but like you're not moving this.
Okay, so this is not so much the Book of Kells. This is the cave paintings from what's it? The place, the place starts with an L in France.
Yeah, exactly. I love this because in our world, the only thing that we know about it so far is that writing is magic, and it seems like painting and stuff isn't. And these are, I kind of feel like this might be pictograms that bridge the gap between like visual art and language. And you can literally describe what you see on the cave wall, and that is a recitation of it. Which
Ooh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's neat. And then it would have like different, that's the valuable thing that can be taken out of it, right? Because like everybody is going to describe it in a slightly different way, and the effect is always going to be slightly different for each person, because they're not going to, that recitation, quote unquote, is going to be different. That's interesting.
Yeah. And then the final one is this prize is almost impossible to sell. Every conceivable obstacle will stand in your way. If something goes wrong, losing the value of the prize will be the least of your concerns. It will be as much trouble to move this prize as it is to take it, if not more. So, like, yeah, you aren't, I guess, like, if you go into this cave, if you read, quote unquote, these walls, like, I think that provides like a transformative experience for you.
Yeah.
But it's probably difficult to get there. And like, nobody can buy that experience off of you. But like, if you go through it, if you do it, like, it's almost like an artistic pilgrimage that like writers might go through.
Yeah, I love that. That's amazing. That's very cool.
Well, folks, there we have it. We have defined a prize that exists in this world, which ended up being super cool and like kind of what we were expecting, but also definitely not what we were expecting.
Yeah. I kind of feel like that with the magic system too, because before we got on this stream, I was like, wow, we're going to be making a magic system. I don't have any ideas for that, but I'm just going to like trust in James's cool system. And that's one of the really cool things about like collaborative world building too, is that like you had ideas that I never would have thought of, and I probably had ideas that you never would have thought of. And building this together is just like a really interesting way of like digging into and talking about it and thinking about these things. So
And kind of like
very
that,
cool.
that is why the book exists as a product too, in that like I find that collaborative experience to be very valuable and very rewarding, but it's also something that you don't have access to all the time. And the
Right.
structure of the book can stand in place a little bit for having a full-on collaborator. The idea that you
Yeah.
can roll a die and get a prompt and be narrowed and channeled into specific questions that you're answering, like all of that, it creates a guide, creates a collaborator for you to
Mm.
help you with your world building. And, just make it like this was an absolute breeze.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And like ask the right questions to like make you think about things that you might not have thought about. So yeah, very cool.
Yeah. Well,
Wonderful.
listeners, I got to thank you again so much for spending time with us, hanging out, and helping us create this world. I hope some of you are moved to play around, even if it is daydreaming, in this little world that we have started chipping away at together. Um, before I send you all off, I'll let you know that this book, the Ultimate RPG Game Master's World Building Guide, is available right now and available pretty much everywhere books are sold. You can head to bit.ly/ultimate world building. That'll bring you to the Adams Media page for this book, where you'll be able to find links to all of the different vendors that carry it. But you can also find it in your favorite brick and mortar bookstores, especially like if you're going to an indie bookstore or a game store. I recommend calling ahead because sometimes indies need to special order these books. But if you can do that, it's worth it because you should always support your local bookstores. That said, you can also probably check your local library. I know some of my other books are carried in libraries, and you can always request it if it is not there.
Mhm.
Before we go, I'd love to offer Alexandra one more opportunity. Alexandra, people got to see you as the brilliant creative force that you are in your natural element. If they are moved to go out and find your work, where can they find it?
Yes, you can find my books again also wherever books are sold, and I second everything that James said about supporting your local bookstores. Um, you can find the full list of my books on my website, alexandrarowland.net. A Conspiracy of Truths is a great place to start. And it's about storytellers and the power of stories, and kind of very much like what we were talking about today a little bit. So if you enjoyed that, you would probably enjoy that book. And keep an eye out for A Taste of Golden Iron, which is coming out next year, just under a year at this point, I think, which is wild to think about.
Wow.
So yeah, I know it's coming up. It's coming up real quick. Like last summer, it was like, oh yeah, it's about 2 years away, and suddenly it's like, oh yes, less than a year now. So there should be like a cover announcement at some point in the future. But what is linear time? Um,
Really
so
hard to say.
really hard to say. Hard to say. I haven't pinned that one down myself yet. But yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for inviting me to do this with you, James. This was like so much fun, and I really loved it.
Yeah, an absolute delight, Alex. Thank you so much for coming on and making this with me. I mean, this was a really special, cool thing, and I'm so glad that
Yes.
we got to do it together.
Yes.
But with that, I'm going to stop the stream, and we'll see you next time, heroes.
All right.